Hello, my name is Cassie Hettinga. I am getting my master's in special education, and the topic I am going to talk to you about today is gamification and using games to promote math literacy. So let's jump in. In this presentation, I'm going to give you an introduction to gamification and kind of what that means. We're going to take a look at my research problem and the data that I used to help me develop this problem. We'll talk about the educational theory that I use to back up this work, and then the best practices I'm going to use in the study and experimentation, as well as the plan of action, and then finally some analysis and next steps that I have for this problem. So, gamification is the use of game playing elements like point keeping or rules of play in other areas that are not specifically a game. This is kind of a newer educational trend that I've noticed recently, and what got me curious about it was how we could use this at a larger scale to engage students with special needs or students who have specific learning disabilities. Gamification can is really broad. It can be something as simple as using playing cards to play a game of like integer war, or something big that is ongoing, such as having teams and a point system to keep track of homework assignments, or something like that. It fits really well within the PBIS model because it can tie into already existing incentive systems within schools and is a way to kind of promote engagement and get students actively participating. I chose this specifically because I am a math teacher, and so I see firsthand that math literacy, specifically for students with IEPs, is very low, and this project aims to support student growth. The way it's going to do that, and this is my whole research problem, is that this study is going to address poor math scores. It's going to measure the connection between gamification and student achievement in the math classroom through the implementation of games or gamification of content weekly over a period of 6 months. Student progress will be measured using the IXL diagnostic tool to measure grade level equivalency, and it's hypothesized that students will increase their diagnostic score at an average of 15% from the baseline. So they will be measured before and after, and we will get into more details of this experimentation phase later in the presentation. The data I originally drew from is my own classroom. So I chose one of my classes to take their IXL data. IXL is an online platform that has math and ELA content, and it is self-paced, kind of self-scoring, and allows students to work independently, which is really nice. Its diagnostic tool also aligns really closely with state testing. I live in the state of Pennsylvania, so it maps pretty well and shows good predictions for students' standardized test scores. So as you can see in my high school class, um, the highest score I have is a 760. That is an equivalent of 7th grade in 6 months math preparedness. And the lowest score I have in here, I believe, is 320. So that would be equivalent of 3rd grade in 2 months. This is a high school math class. So at the very least, my highest score is still 2 grades below grade level and as low as 3rd grade. This is an alternative at high school education setting, and these students are all special needs. So it's not entirely surprising, but it does show that their need for foundational kind of skills is really critical. This same data is just mapped here onto a graph. The other data I drew from for this project was the Keystone test results. Keystones are the state test that Pennsylvania uses. I was comparing the Keystone test scores from 2019 and 2023. So in 2019, the percentage of students who were below basic is a 10.5% of the whole state. And then in 2023, that score jumped up to 23.7%. So the scores of students who are below basic has more than doubled, which also shows the need for a different approach to math, a way to get kids more engaged and a way to shore up those foundational skills. So I thought that gamification could be one way to kind of bridge that gap. The theory this is based on is that gamification uses strategies that increase student motivation and participation. Specifically, and I've seen this in my practice, and it was backed up by the research that I did for this project, students with disabilities specific to math or students who have had traumatic experiences in a math classroom are really averse to trying new things. But if you can use a strategy that gets them engaged and lowers the difficulty for them to access the activity, such as getting them competitive or making it fun, it can be way easier for those students to take the leap and try new things. In one of the studies in particular that I read, I'm going to read this quote. The study provides a clear overview of the effectiveness of gamification in facilitating the academic, cognitive, life, and social skills of individuals with special needs. Gamification positively contributes to students' emotions, motivation, engagement, attitude, and learning performance. So, gamification can be a good strategy specifically for students with special needs. In this study, I chose to use IXL as a diagnostic tool because it maps really well with our statewide testing, the PSSAs, and because of the research that I did into gamification and found that it has proven effective for students with special needs in the K-12 setting. My plan for this project is that students will be assessed before and after a 6-month instructional window. Students will participate in weekly math games, and then we'll see how that has had an impact on their IXL scores and projected growth rates. Sampling technique, because I work at a really small school, I chose to sample the entire population. So that is all of this instructor's 5 math classes. Student data will also be protected by randomly assigning them a number. One issue with this is that it is a very small sample size, and it only includes the data from one teacher, as we only have one math teacher. So that is a possible source of bias in this problem. But the population is aimed at specifically special needs students, again, because it is at a high school where 100% of the students are special needs. So it does measure in a special needs environment the outcomes. Limitations, of course, are student motivations and outside factors from their life. Other interruptions in the school schedule, such as school breaks or proximity to a holiday or different spike seasons, can impact student participation and motivation as well. And the data that will be collected is through the IXL diagnostic test, and then the gamification will be implemented once a week in the classroom. Games will be varied because they will be within the scope and sequence of the math curriculum, so not every week will be the same. This is also a source where it could get tricky, and I want to talk more about that when I talk about the next steps. Threats to internal validity, I mentioned this before, are the small sample size, but the research is really based on that IXL data, which tries to keep it as quantitative as possible. The independent variable would be the use of games or gamification once a week, and then the dependent would be the IXL scores. So in investigating this problem, I think that I would change the scope. Instead of an overall score, I would look much more specifically at specific gamification strategies and measuring just one specific strand of the diagnostic tool, like number and operations skills, versus looking at students' overall skills, because I think that would kind of eliminate outside factors and variables impacting it. I also would extend the study to be maybe a whole year and give the teacher specific gamification strategies to use rather than leaving it so open-ended to get more clear data on this problem. That is a brief overview of using gamification as a means to improve math scores. This study would follow all IRB protocol and do its best to protect student data and not enact any harm on students, obviously. At the end here, I have just included my resources that I used in the research for this paper and this presentation. I welcome any questions or feedback. Thank you so much. Goodbye.